First of all, there is this urban myth, right? I'm just going to plug in GPT and solve
Mhm.
all of my enterprise translation problems. And that's where you go, yeah, but the models don't quite self police and self heal yet. So, how are you
Mhm.
going to catch your model hallucinations and mitigate your model hallucinations?
Welcome to the Talking AI podcast, where we talk AI with both experts in the field and early adopters. I'm your host, Matt Paige, and we're here to demystify AI for you so you can get some value from it. Let's talk some AI. Language is the original interface. Now, with AI, we're rewriting how humans communicate across borders, platforms, and cultures faster than ever. But while AI translation is getting better by the day, actually deploying it at scale across dozens of languages, format systems is a whole different challenge. And this applies to deploying any AI solution at scale. Today, I'm joined by Olga Beregovaya, VP of AI at Smartling, to break down what it really takes to reach human level translation and where LLMs shine and where they fall short. Welcome to Talking AI, Olga.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Excited to get into this chat. And I'm curious, let's just set the stage here. Like, give me some context, A, for what Smartling does. But I'm also curious with my guests that are in these roles of VP of AI. What does your day in the life look like as VP of AI nowadays? Give us kind of that breakdown of your role.
Okay, so first of all, Smartling. Smartling is a fully AI powered global content delivery platform, or to say it simpler, translation delivery platform, which equally can deliver fully automated translation, and we'll touch on human parity later, or equally provide facilities for human in the loop where human in the loop is needed, both on the prompting side or design side and post editing side. So that would be Smartling in a
Nice.
nutshell.
And I guess that's like global businesses that have exposure all over the globe, and you have this need for multi-language, whether it's marketing or any number of things. I'm assuming that's kind of where y'all come into play.
I would say will come into play if somebody looks at our website. We have a pretty substantial, like a whole page, huge page of tiny logos, list of clients. And they really do come from all ways of life. And you're absolutely right. Servicing a number of domains. Obviously, legal will have certain set of requirements, right? Retail will have a completely different set of requirements. Online opinion portal is a beast on its own. So, what does it consist of? It consists of linguistic particularities of each content type,
Mm.
and it consists of the input format. And again, to your point, what you would pull in from DAM would be dramatically different from what you would pull in from Git, right? In terms of the string
Yeah.
formalism and what the content would look like. So there are multiple dimensions to it. And then we add 7,000 languages spoken in the world. And that would pretty much give you a picture of
Wow.
what
That's
we do.
crazy.
I wouldn't say we do all
Is
seven
that
languages, though.
yeah. But just in general, that's amazing that there are 7,000 languages spoken in the world. That still kind of blows my mind. There's that many different languages out there in the world. Yeah,
But
so I'm curious, your role as VP of AI, what does that look like on a daily basis? And I'm curious how that has that changed since the advent of generative AI, ChatGPT, because AI has always been cool and popular. It's at a whole nother level right now. What does that look like for your daily life and work?
the daily life has changed dramatically. Basically, one needs to be up 1 hour earlier just to go through all the TLDRs and
Right.
all the latest model releases. And obviously, in the modern day of models battle, right? And each model tends to also evolve and come with its own flavors. So it's just staying appraised. Staying appraised is one of the
Yeah.
most important things. And it has never been this dramatic and this massive ever in my 25-year-old career in language AI. So first of all,
Yeah.
it's just being in the know, looking at articles published, and just you wake up to a new day every day, both in terms of model
Yeah.
number, anything, number of parameters, capabilities, whatever, everything. So it's a new world. Second is not to fall for this trap and actually navigate your way and research and development way and companies' way through what matters and what can be parked or would be irrelevant to our work. So get as much knowledge as you can and steer course as much as you can amidst.
Yeah, and that's a great lesson, I think, for everybody listening to like the first part you were just hitting on. It's like, how do you identify the signal through the noise? And it's so difficult. I had a strategy at Hatchworks AI, and I feel the same pain because every day it's like some massive announcement that typically you would get a few a year. It feels like they're daily or weekly right now. And I think the point you mentioned is like, how do you get through the hype? And it's difficult because everybody's riding this wave right now. They're intentionally playing into the hype. And for me, I just, as much as I can, and I think for people listening too, go try the tools yourself. I think that's really important because if you're just learning by listening to others, that can be difficult to figure out that signal through the noise sometimes. Quick break in the pod. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you've been thinking about how to actually use AI inside your business. And that's exactly why we built the AI Opportunity Finder. It's a free tool that helps you uncover high impact, tailored AI use cases based on your business, your goals, your pain points, and your industry. No fluff, no generic use cases, just real ideas that fit your business, and they're ranked by ROI potential. It takes about 3 minutes to run, and it's like having your own personal AI strategist for free. If you want to try it for free, check out the link in the show notes or go to hatchworks.com/AI-opportunity-finder.
Oh, absolutely. And to that effect, filtering through the noise, I think we at Smartling made a solid investment decision to having a model evaluation framework. So you
Oh,
really,
take me through that. That's interesting.
if we were to test every little model that's out there, and we have this research
Yeah.
paper and news Slack channel on my team, and of
Yeah.
course we drop every time Hugging Face announces something or there's a new announcement. Of course, we drop information about this model, but it's more of an FYI. We usually
Yeah.
identify the models that are fit for our purposes. We usually already have a pretty good idea just by looking at model parameters, just looking at model card. We would know whether it's worthwhile for us to look at it. But then we have the evaluation framework where we have usual suspects that, like, I don't know, F measure or blue, meteor, comet, and like basically a set of automated metrics that we would just run the model through and we would get a pretty quick answer on shall we proceed or are we good where we are. And again, so somewhat
That's it. So
yeah, go ahead.
is this almost, so it's grading essentially models, new models that are being introduced to determine, okay, do we shift a model here or there? And you've almost built this automation into your system and your process. Is that kind of how
Yeah,
to think about it?
that's kind of how it is. It's yes, we have the automated system. We produce translation, and what is there to translation? There's quality of translation, and there is ability to estimate quality of translation, and
Mhm.
then feedback loop from there and deliver better and better translation. So we're not gonna. We know what we do as a platform. So for us to build
Mhm.
this evaluation framework is fairly easy because we know that the model needs to be fit for purpose, right? The model needs to deliver to our objectives. So that's why the evaluation, like, we don't need to evaluate how the model calculates, right? We don't need to evaluate how the model,
Mhm.
I don't know, dream something up, summarizes e-discovery emails. We have our set of
Yeah,
tasks.
because you would go on forever. It would be a million tests if you
Nor
tried
do
to
we
account
need
for
to,
everything,
but
right?
since our test cases are very, we know exactly what the test cases are, both on the coding side of the house and on the linguistic delivery side of the
Yeah.
house. We run it against our test cases. And it's very easy. Sift out, worthwhile.
And we're going to get to this later, but that's a key thing, I think, for enterprises that are looking to leverage AI embedded into their systems. Like what Olga just went through is a great approach to staying up to date. Because a lot of people, when you build something, they just assume, oh, I built it, it's good to go. We got ChatGPT, whatever model in there. Things change. Being adaptive is very important to stay up to date in a sense.
And maybe there's another dimension to it. By now, I don't know, something very dramatic needs to happen, like a major breakthrough for us to pivot from our models that we've selected for our processes. So
Yeah.
if we know that Claude is like Sonnet is going to work somewhere, but
Mhm.
3.5 is a legacy model that tells us, okay, hey, these enhancements happen at 4, but by then we already have our Sonnet prompts. We have Sonnet integrated.
Uh,
I mean, we have it already integrated with our systems. So one other dimension is something super dramatic needs to happen. There needs to be like crazy good at translation, quality estimation, summarization
yeah.
model. Then
Yeah.
we're like, okay, with pivot. Other than that, we have our model garden, whatever the best word is,
Yeah.
stealing from Google. And we try to still confine to Bedrock, Azure, or OpenAI. So basically, there is a set of models that we choose to work with, and then
Mhm.
we would
Yeah.
iterate within generations of those models and different sizes of those models.
Exactly. That makes sense. Like the juice has to be worth the squeeze to go through the effort of changing something to get the incremental benefit. Otherwise, you're just constantly spinning in circles, I can imagine. And what's I think interesting with Smartling, so the company's been around for 16 years. And I was looking over at your LinkedIn. You joined in September of 2022, which is right before like ChatGPT came out, this like seminal moment, even though transformer architecture has been around for since what, 2017, it just kinda took
In
that moment
16,
to do.
17, right.
What does this evolution looked like where we're going from very deterministic systems to now we have this new tool, this probabilistic system? What does that look like? And just in your career as being in the AI space, and now you have this new, like, amazing thing to leverage.
So I joined Smartling 2.5 years ago, but by then we already had a chance to play with transformer models in neural machine translation. And GPT-2 was already customizable. So it already kind of gave us a pretty healthy preview of where things were going.
Yeah.
So that was the right time to join the company that specializes in AI driven translation technology. But if you look back at my career, you're absolutely right. Okay, first things first, large language models have a language component to them.
Mhm.
So, to an extent, as much as foundational generalized models can do everything under the sun, right? Language has always been a piece of that. So, that's statement one. Statement two, you don't necessarily go from deterministic approaches to transform models. You can also augment. And that's one of the principles we
Mm.
follow at Smartling. Don't fix what's not broken. Don't
Yeah,
pull
that's a good point.
in
Yeah.
don't pull in Gen AI or any other form of machine learning where good old rule-based deterministic approaches that are significantly cheaper work just as fine. Like things like,
Yeah.
for instance, in French, you want to have a space before the slash and after the slash. You don't need an LLM to do it for you, right? You write a
Mhm.
simple rule and just say, so I think it's augmented approach. It's not necessarily transforming, but
Yeah.
go ahead.
That was just a great point there too, because like I feel like a lot of people fall into this shiny object syndrome where they're like, "Oh, I have this new shiny toy. I got to go apply it to everything," but it doesn't necessarily need to be applied to everything. So I think that's such an important spot when you're thinking about how you adopt AI. It's okay, where can it best be applied to current things? That's one, and I think two, it's like where can it be applied to things that were never possible before that now this enables? And the stuff that's fine working as it is, like to your point, just leave it alone. It's fine. It doesn't need to be applied to everything.
Yeah. But to answer maybe a previous question about the trajectory, in the NLP space, the evolution was very, just like probably everywhere else in machine learning, right? You go from rule based, right? You go
Mhm.
from rule based, and machine translation would be a great example from that. And for a while, for a long while, rule based automated translation was dominating the scene. So that's where I come from. Again, having been around the industry for 25 years, even before rule based machine translation, you had approaches like using Levenstein distance to identify fuzzy matches in previous translation. So it was always, I would say that language industry, and that's the beauty of it. By now, we might be even more ready for the AI revolution than maybe other segments and other sectors are, because we've always worked with some language related processing tools. And now in
Yeah.
LLMs that are, yes, there is multimodality, but mostly LLMs started as text-based models. I think we were going through just pure math to rule based, then to statistical approaches, and now finding ourselves in transformer models, right? And all of their iterations. That was a very natural trajectory following this is what's
Yeah.
new in ML, and this is how it applies to language. And I've been watching it throughout my career. Backend changed a lot, but even more, the user experience changed dramatically. And what translators can and cannot do, you actually need to rewrite and retrain your translators and your linguists every time a new approach surfaces.
Mm.
Example, statistical machine translation does not hallucinate. NMT took to hallucination immediately. We all know about large language model hallucinations. So suddenly, a human in the loop is dealing with completely different bag of cats, whatever, completely different set of issues.
Can of worms,
Can of
maybe
worms, can of
problems. Yeah.
worms. Yeah. What do you have in front?
I like bag of cats though. I'm gonna
Whatever.
start
I think
using
there's
that.
a cat over there. Look, hold on, sorry. Here I am preaching that English is not my first language, so that can be forgiven. Yeah, again, I've been watching it and being a part of it throughout my career, but the explosion that we're dealing with now and the realm of possibilities in natural language processing that we're exposed to now is nothing like what we've seen before.
What is your first language?
Russian.
Russian?
Yes,
Okay.
Russian.
How many languages do you speak out of curiosity?
Because I come from St. Petersburg, we were very close to Nordic countries. So I happen to speak,
Okay.
I'm native fluent in Danish, I would say reasonably decent when I have practice in Swedish and Norwegian. And because I spent half of my time in Mexico, there is like some twisted version of Spanish that I speak. But as you
Yeah.
read academic papers on structural linguistics, you natively have to
Mhm.
learn how to read French and German papers because a lot of like traditionalist school of linguistics comes from Germany and from France.
Yeah. So but you have a nuanced understanding of language in general, which is pretty cool being in this space. My language expertise goes into the very like minute bit of Spanish, and that's about it.
But no, it's also because I studied structural linguistics. I mean, all the syntax morphology, like phonology and language structure
Really?
is
Oh,
the field
cool.
of study.
Okay.
And everybody on my team, which is essential for being in that field, everybody on my team has understanding of structure of languages. We do
Mm.
not, we would go again, 7,000 word languages, 7,100 or whatever that is. Say out of them, we can service 500. I cannot have a team that speaks Swahili, Punjabi, Yiddish,
Hmm.
and pick your fourth language, whatever you want, Estonian.
Yeah.
But it's
There you go.
essential to
There you go.
understand, okay, here you are in the Finno-Ugric family or in Romance, family of Romance languages. It is essential for the team to understand how languages operate and what you can get out of
Mm.
Chinese and ideographic languages, right, as opposed
Yeah.
to agglutinative languages. So that's the essential knowledge for our field altogether. And I'm blessed to have a team that understands it and can work with it.
That nuance is really interesting. I'm curious on that same thread, what makes certain languages easier or harder for an LLM to understand, predict, interpret, whatever term you want to use? Do you notice any nuance there between maybe these different language families and whatnot?
That would
Or
be
is some harder to translate between others, maybe?
I mean, first of all, if you look at, and I wouldn't go, I'll probably go a little bit, roll back a little bit and go to transformer model because neural machine translation equally is a transformer model, which is with fewer
Yeah.
parameters, right? But, and purpose built. But other than that, we're still talking about transformers. First of all, just because of the nature of the training data, and if you say the model has scraped all of the internet, we know how much English is in the training data. So first things
That's
first,
a great point.
it's and I mean, I can go for another hour about training data not being diverse enough. And sometimes you would have the lexical coverage, but you would not have the cultural phenomena. And that's when you
Yeah,
start
yeah.
producing
The nuance.
and then you start producing absolutely weird things in the target language that look like the target language, smell like the target language, just have nothing to do with the target language. So that's
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
But because the majority of training data, unless you fine tune for a specific language, the majority is English, having English as a source is the ultimate dream. Right, because
Mm,
your input is
yeah.
extremely easy to understand, right? Your input is super understandable, and the model would have no issue understanding the input sentence just because the English is the prevailing language of those models. Now, we actually run a grid of language complexity or automated translation, and there are some language families that renders themselves equally good to translation with large language models and with neural machine translation, and that's Romance languages and Nordic languages. If
Mm.
we want to show off to a customer, if you really want to put your best foot forward, grab Brazilian Portuguese and shine, right? Vocabulary,
Yeah.
grammar, reasonably fairly simple, training data set, huge. Same for Latin American Spanish. Yeah, training data set, grammar of the language. So all of that, between all of that, I would say that Romance languages, also the way you tokenize Romance languages, is probably make them a very easy translation target. But then in the bottom of that grid, we would have Finno-Ugric languages like Estonian, which would be extremely complex grammar, right, of Finno-Ugric languages,
Mm,
Finnish or Hungarian, combined with lower training data set, lower language coverage, and
mhm.
this is where you would have complexities. Now there are some interesting edge cases like Southeast Asian languages which actually render themselves, if you have enough of training corpora, because of the nature of the languages, they're fairly easy to translate, even despite the give or take sparse training data set.
It's interesting too. I saw this study, and I think it was related to Chinese Mandarin,
Mhm.
maybe, and because the language itself is character based, and those characters have symbols versus English and every other
Correct.
language, it's based on an alphabet. It's I forget if it was cheaper, easier, maybe a combination of both for training on that. I guess having the corpus of training data is a whole nother element, but it's an interesting kind of experiment they were testing
Yeah,
there around
and
that.
LLMs think in tokens, right? They
Yeah.
understand tokens, right? And if the token boundary is very obvious in a specific language, then obviously it renders itself much better to translation with LLM,
That's a good
right?
point.
I
This
hit
other
a wall.
study,
It's,
yeah.
I mean, it's worth a dissertation on its own. We were hitting a wall, but I think we nailed it. There's a funny thing, if you think about UI, user interface, quite
Mhm.
often you have incomplete sentences or
Yeah.
they're not sentences of any kind at all. But yet, whatever the translation is, you need to fit it into a specific box, right? Because you
Full
only have this
length.
thing.
Yep.
And this is where you go. I have a word here, a weird sentence here, and yet I have my counterpart, the system that only understands tokens. And this is where,
Mhm.
okay, I'm gonna give you a chopped off string that makes no sense whatsoever and that it doesn't even contain real words. And this is like the balance between what's a word and what's a token is at play for many languages much more than it is for other.
Yeah. I remember dealing with that way back in the day before all of this crazy LLM stuff. And we had humans doing all this. But I remember that same consideration around the UI because some languages are just naturally longer and it changes the whole design and feel and everything there when you do this translation. That's
Right.
bringing back some memories for me now.
Yeah, but there are two ways that we can expand the box or shrink the text. They're only one of the
Yeah,
two. Look,
exactly.
this is one of the examples where LLMs do not shine by any means. So there are a lot of bells and
Mm.
whistles that you need to add. So there are cases like that.
What
Yeah.
in that same too, and this was maybe a year or even maybe two ago, earlier days. I remember them doing some type of test on different languages with the cost of AI, like a per token cost, and it being more expensive for certain languages, whether it was based on training data or length of the language and the output. So it was almost like this introduced bias in a sense based on the language you were interacting with, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. But again, it's what is a word? What's a token? Because if you
Yeah.
if you burn all this money and all this effort, like whether you host a model or not, if the token is equivalent of a word, and it's shorter, right? The word is shorter, then it inherently be cheaper as opposed to longer. If you look at German compounds for example.
Yeah.
So yes, the whole fine tuning and inference cost is I mean, again, it's a thing of its own.
Let's get into that. So let's shift to this whole discussion around enterprise scale because anybody nowadays can go build something in Lovable connected to AI or a custom GPT and all this type of stuff. But actually building a system that has enterprise scale has a whole nother list of things you need to consider. What things do you think about when you're going to enterprise scale in a sense? Having something that's actually enterprise ready. What are those vectors you think about, those attributes when you're going through that process?
Well, among other things, we think about vectors, but I mean that aside,
Yeah,
I
vectors
just have sorry,
realistically
I
too.
just
Yeah.
they're just too good to miss. So first of all, there is this urban myth, right? I'm just gonna plug in GPT and solve
Hmm.
all of my enterprise translation problems. And that's where you go, "Mm, yeah, but the models don't quite self-police and self-heal yet. So how are you
Hmm.
going to catch your model hallucinations and mitigate your model hallucinations?" So you just
Yeah.
think about the quality of translation. A, what are the language independent approaches that would allow us to service different content types across a variety of languages? And you identify things like RAG, for instance, right? Enterprise translation, enterprise scale translation systems. We store translation memories, right? We store
Yeah.
or extract style guides or stylistic preferences. We store
Hmm.
glossaries. We parse multiple file types. So, first things first, we want to make sure that our customers get the benefit of being able to parse and prepare for automated translation different inputs. So that's one.
Hmm.
Second,
Yeah.
and that's something I've noticed working with a lot of buyer side enterprises, often engineering teams think about English. A lot of testing is done in English. Sometimes there would be like a
Yeah.
Japanese or an Indian coder on the team that would say, oh, okay, look, I just quickly tested it for whatever, for again, pick a language, for Japanese. And it's very important for scalable enterprise implementation, global enterprise implementation, to make sure that you have a solution that works across a variety of languages, that you're not
Hmm.
trapped in monolingual or bilingual universe, and you address the needs of all the geos. So language coverage, breadth of language coverage, ability to ingest from different content types and parse them out. Models don't play well with special characters to date. Models don't play
Yeah.
well with emojis. Models freak
Yeah.
out when they see nested HTML tags. So obviously, when you take this into consideration and they change again for different languages, you need to be sure that your AI approach is fully internationalized from the get go. So
Yeah.
then there we are. There are your hallucinations, and you need to have hallucination mitigation mechanisms that are language neutral, universal, so you can phase in languages and phase out.
Mm.
Multi-model approach is also important because of language coverage, because different models process different languages differently. So, like
Mm.
Smartling, for instance, we, as I said in the beginning, we're not stuck with a single model, a single family of models, but we know Llama would do great here, Gemini
Yeah.
would do great here, OpenAI would have a good coverage, but come with its own set of challenges. And once, say, you've solved it all, you have your RAG mechanism, there come your inference time and latency, right?
Yeah. Which is important.
And if you just have one endpoint and that's it, before you know it, you're stuck. And if you need to publish something real time, you really need to have the latency mitigation mechanism that can follow different avenues, right? It can be multi-threading.
Yeah, and for the audience, when you're talking about inference time, compute, and things like that, for if you're not familiar with that term, those listening, think of when you're interacting with ChatGPT, how long it's taking to give you a response back. That's dealing with that latency piece, which can be very bad on the user experience side if it's taking forever to respond based on the use case you're using it for, essentially, right?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, one fun fact, I was just talking to the head of R&D in my department, and we were talking about why we're not playing enough or as much with latest generation of reasoning models. And the answer is very
Yeah.
simple. If something needs 5 steps to think, I don't have the time for those 5 steps to take place.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
maybe could even produce better results on quality assessment, but until we figure out how to deal with the delays, we probably would try and stay with LLMs versus going to
And that's all about tailoring the model to the use case too. That's a great example of the latency, that attribute or vector there, in essence, is prohibitive to using it for that particular use case. And like when you're considering models, like obviously there's cost performance. Are there other attributes you consider when you're thinking about a model, or is it primarily those?
our engineering department runs reports capturing signals on latency. So that obviously that's one, the
Latency,
performance
yeah, yeah, it's another one.
latency. So that's a dimension. How often do we need to default to the fallback? And that's actually another part of enterprise strategy. Like how often would a model choke on something or fail for one reason or another? How often do we need to invoke the fallback model? So that would be a second.
Yeah,
How often does the model say on 10,000 strings? How many times did the model fail, choke,
yeah.
interrupt the workflow? So stability,
Hmm.
how many times do we need to invoke a fallback? Like the model is just not performing in engineering terms, latency time, language quality of translation, and then quality estimation. How good is a model at predicting the quality? So language coverage is another parameter that we would definitely take into consideration. Model size, model size. Can you get the same result of medium sized model that you can from,
Yeah,
like, for instance, you look at Amazon Nova family, for instance. Where can we get with Nova Mini, and can we get to the same place as Nova Pro? Obviously,
yep,
reporting to the CEO with a CFO in the CFO in the running the P&L, obviously the model cost and the model cost, the ROI is definitely one of the huge factors. But that also
yeah.
constraint, one of the Smartling principles is constraint breeds creativity. So that
Yeah, totally.
makes us prune our prompts. Like if you look,
Yeah.
in order to get great translation, you've just burned through 3,000 tokens, and the CFO is not going to be happy. That's where we need to sit down and figure out what we can cut out, what we can rag in, and what's not necessary at all.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm curious, like, completely pivot. Let's go like
Okay.
forward looking. Do you think there's a point in time where what's happening technologically today, and it's almost like this accelerated globalization in some ways? Do you ever think we reach like a universal language, or do you think having, like you mentioned in the beginning, 7,000 languages is something that'll just always be true? Do you think there's almost this language extinction that may come to pass over time?
Getting, oh, wow. That's a big question.
Philosophical, right?
You see, that's
Use your reasoning model part
very
of your brain
cold.
right
That's
now.
pretty esoteric right there. Let me think about it. The way I like to think about it is more erasing the linguistic divide, right? That's in
Yeah.
place right now and enabling communication between different languages, language family. Like in the past, you needed to pivot through English. I have a pivot language for everything, right? Now you can go between whatever the language combinations. So, I mean, Esperanto failed miserably, right? So we're talking about that singularity powered by the next generation of Esperanto. I wouldn't think so. I would think that what's going to happen is probably there's so many parameters to it. I mean, will long tail languages go extinct? We've been speaking about it for a long time. What I think is
Hmm.
going to happen is the existing language families, people still talk, people still
Yeah.
communicate. You still have the
Yeah.
spoken modality. I think what's going to happen though, the spoken modality might get simpler, but will still retain its current qualities, and the language families are going to stay exactly
Mm.
what they are. Now, when you look at the
There's,
written modality, spoken, you and I talking, right?
yeah.
The way you and I talk probably is gonna be more preserved than the written modality. That's my prediction.
That's
If
interesting.
I'm
And there's
making any
something you
sense.
said that just triggered an idea in my head. Like you mentioned the connector piece. What instantly came to my mind is like APIs in a sense, to where it almost enables more communication, but in your native language. So me
Mhm,
speaking to somebody else in Mandarin, that becomes easier with this technology. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm changing the language
correct,
I'm speaking in, but it allows more nodes of communication in an easier way. Like
correct,
I think that's a really interesting
correct. The yes.
notion, which
So the
doesn't lead
range,
to extinction.
yeah, nothing goes extinct. What's gonna happen though, and there is a lot of research about it, we always say, "Oh, we need human corpora to train models." The reality is, over the
Mhm.
past 5 years, the way we write and we speak is so impacted by the way the models, like machine translation or generated text, we are influenced by the models just as much. So it's kind of funny, it started going both ways. Example,
Yeah.
you learn if you're not a prompt engineer, yet you want to have a nighttime philosophical debate with your ChatGPT, you kind of know how to phrase and how to formulate your ask to get the most relevant
Yeah.
results. So,
Totally.
thousand asked in, the way you communicate has changed dramatically. So it's not that there'll be a
Hmm.
universal language, but more I think there'll be this universal communication mode, universal communication
Hmm.
modality, where we'll know how to interact with models.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think that's a great stopping point right there. Olga, thanks for being on. Where can people find you, find SmartLink, learn more about it? Hit us with the websites and everything where they can find you.
Finding me is simple, adding me on LinkedIn. That's pretty much
Cool.
where, yeah, finding me on LinkedIn. And in terms of Smartling, first of all, we're very diligent about publishing blogs and publishing our materials on our website. So that would be smartling.com. And again, we have super diligent in our social media presence. So following on us on social media platforms, we're very active on LinkedIn. We publish something pretty much every other day. So
Oh, cool.
LinkedIn and SmartLink website would be the best ways of equally finding me and finding the company.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me and talking a little bit AI.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Talking AI podcast. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave us a review. We love those. For more info on Talking AI, visit talkingaipodcast.com. The single biggest mistake we see companies make with AI is they don't properly train their teams. We see it all the time. Companies roll out AI tools and expect people to just figure it out. But using AI effectively requires a totally different mindset and skill set. And that's exactly why we built training for every level of your org, from AI training for teams and executives to training engineering teams on our generative driven development methodology. Or if you've already identified your AI use cases and want to just prioritize where to start, we offer an AI roadmap and ROI workshop to help you build a clear plan. It's all about going from we should use AI to actually driving real value with it. Head over to hatchworks.com to learn more.